Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 448 of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. First, I want to call out that I'm back with our good friend Dan Wagner, who not only is a former guest of our podcast, but he's now formed his own podcast of his own with our other former podcast guest, Kenzie Vath. Now, they are doing this for the Global Lyme Alliance. It's the Lyme Plus podcast, and I encourage everybody to go check out that podcast as well. And coincidentally, we're here today with the editor of that podcast, and that's Presley Taylor, who we're going to introduce in just a quick minute. But I also want to point out that Presley, who is our guest that we're going to be interviewing today, is an ambassador for the Global Lyme Alliance. She also is a part of Generation Lyme. She facilitates a lot of their meetups that they do on Zoom. She also does their social media and writes a ton of blog posts. She's a super talented young woman with a brilliant mind that you're going to learn all kinds of crazy stuff from. She's done a ton of treatments, has a background in a lab. I mean, I just can't wait to get into this. So first of all, Dan, if you could just say hello, and then we're going to jump right in with Presley.
Yeah, Matt, I really appreciate the introduction and also just kind of the call out for Lyme Plus. Again, we have the same mission you guys have. We're just trying to get more information out there to the community. Your podcast was incredibly beneficial for me when I was kind of lost and trying to figure things out. And we just want to be another resource out there for people really trying to find what's going on or treatments or research or anything along those lines. And truly, I think some of the patient stories about recovery were probably the most beneficial for me because it's like, man, you're in this dark, like just hole and trying to figure out how to get out. And if you see other people that are able to get out of it, you're like, I can do that too. So it was very, very awesome. And I appreciate what you guys do. And I'm excited, Presley. She's become a friend. And also we work together with the Global Lyme Alliance. And I'm really excited to do this podcast with you guys today.
So, Presley, first of all, welcome to our Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Like Dan was saying, it's so beneficial to have these podcasts and to like hear people's stories and hear how they got better. And so, yeah, thank you so much for having this. And like I was saying to you earlier, I remember listening to this and me and my mom listening to this like 5 years ago and really just like when we didn't know what to do. So it's been a great resource and I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, Presley, I'd like to start with talking about what life was like as a young child. Now, granted, you're only 18 years old, and again, you've done a ton in your life, but let's bring it all the way back to your earliest memories of when you were a child and describe what life was like for us at that time.
Yeah, so I think like thinking back, like looking back from my journey, I think it's hard when people have Lyme at a young age because it's hard to know what being sick feels like and how to express that. But I think I started having symptoms around like 10 years old because I was having nightmares. I was having like weird stomach things where I just couldn't tolerate sugar. And then I was also just like having insomnia. Like I would like go to my parents' room every night and just be like, I can't sleep. And that's really weird for a 10-year-old. But then like things would get better when I was less stressed, like over the summer, because I always put a lot of stress on myself to get good grades. And then I think I really started feeling like significant symptoms where I was like, okay, something's wrong, like around 13, 14. And I think I've seen that in other people's journeys where like they go through like puberty or like a significant change. And like these infections just come up. So it was kind of around COVID as well. And so I started just yeah, I really wasn't feeling well. I was having headaches, stomach issues, sleep problems, joint pain, and I was trying to go to school and it was just getting harder and harder.
But you were very active, right? I know from our chat offline that you were big into sports, you were into tennis, swimming, jujitsu, and you had a relatively normal childhood until the time you were 12 when you had these intermittent symptoms that popped up throughout your 10-year-old to 14-year-old life. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had a relatively normal childhood. And then as well, I think like when I started getting to being like around a teenager, I was like moving, I was exposed to mold, like all of these is like kind of the perfect storm. But yeah, up to the point when I was like, until I was like 13, 14, I had a pretty normal childhood.
Talk to us about what you knew about tick diseases and Lyme disease specifically growing up in California.
Well, it was actually funny because me and my like parents used to hike and I just remember my dad saying like, yeah, be careful. Like if you ever get bitten by a tick and you get Lyme disease, you'll die. So I think he was just like make sure to tell us if you see a tick on you or something. But I didn't really know too much about it. And Yeah, when they even tested for it, I got tested through Children's. I didn't even know that they were testing for it. I had never really like known about it till I actually got like the diagnosis when I was like 14. And then when I was looking it up, I was like, yay, this can be cured in a month.
So we're going to get there for your diagnosis, but I'm going to pull back a little bit more again because you mentioned that you were a hiker. Did you ever find a tick biting you, or did you ever find a tick crawling on you when you're out in the, the wild or the nature in California?
I did not. Honestly, I've never seen like I don't even think I've seen a tick in my life. And I I think when I got bit was when I was pretty young because I started having symptoms at like weird sleep issues at 10. But the like strain of Lyme that I have is like a European one. And the only time I've been to Europe, I lived in Switzerland for like on and off for like a year and a half when I was like 6 or 7. So I could have gotten it then and like not remembered because I was really, really a kid.
Yeah, what I find fascinating about that is so you have the European strain of Lyme disease. You were there when you were a child, but we've also had some researchers on the podcast recently that have said that what the current medical establishment believes to be a European exclusive strain of Lyme, they're actually finding that strain in ticks in America too, right? So could it be that you were bit by a tick in California or somewhere in the States? Could it be that you were bit when you were 6 when you were traveling to Europe? Maybe, one, maybe the other, right? And I think that's really going to be impossible to know. But let's talk about now you're 10 years old, you're having some of these issues like insomnia, GI issues, things like that. Now, did your parents take you to the doctors, or were they thinking this is just normal growing pains and let's just see if things get worse?
Yeah, they just thought I think it was like normal, like growing pains or like something like I was just like stressed because it would get better. And I think like the thing is like I think some people have Lyme and it gets really bad really fast, but for me it was a very slow onset. And also like they got to the point where they didn't know what to do, so I kind of just stopped talking about it. I know my mom took me to like see a like child therapist, but it didn't help because it wasn't like psychological, it was like physically like something was off and like my body was not okay. um but yeah, I don't think like I think it would be bad and then it would get better and then they'd be like, okay, like it went away, it's fine.
Yeah, and just this is super common. Granted, you were 10 years old, but even with adults that contract Lyme disease, after not being able to get an answer, they generally will stop talking about it because they don't know what to do. And I think probably looking back, Presley, in your situation, and I think for myself and Dan as well, we know that we shouldn't stop talking about it because something is wrong and we need to keep fighting for answers to get better and not try to push that down and suppress it, right? So I think that's an important message you're highlighting here. The other thing is you mentioned that your parents took you to a therapist as well at a young age, and obviously it was physical, so there wasn't much value there. But did any of these therapists identify that you had anxiety or depression-like symptoms and potentially indicate that it could have been psychological solely, or were they really like, we can't help, it seems to be physical, this is not our purview?
I don't remember a lot, but I think the therapists were recognizing that I had like the sense of anxiety and then sleep issues and I like couldn't sleep, but it was like a perpetuating cycle because then I'd be anxious about not sleeping, which would make the not sleeping like worse because I was like young and I'd be up all night by myself and it was just like it was awful. So and then if I went to bed, I would have nightmares, so I was scared of sleeping. So it was like this cycle. So I remember them giving me some like tools to like help my mind kind of like focus on other things. So those might have helped, but I don't think I ever like properly got diagnosed with like anything because I just went to see like therapist, not psychologist. But yeah, they were really just trying to do things to kind of lower my stress about sleep and just help me relax.
Yeah, I'm going to take a quick pause to highlight a study that just came out this week. And I just, I think you're going to love this, geeking out over some of the sciencey stuff, knowing, what you're into. So an article just came out about the lymphatic system. And just to kind of highlight for our listeners, the lymphatic system is similar to the lymphatic system, right? The lymphatic system is a system that isn't powered by our heart. It's powered by movement, right? That's why people rebound. They jump up and down. They exercise to help these fluids pull toxins out of our body so we don't remain toxic, right? So whether we're killing bacteria like Lyme disease, whether we're exposed to mold or heavy metals, all those things have to be removed from our body through traditional ways. You pee, right? You poop, you sweat, etc. But when it comes to our brain and sleeping and insomnia, there's a separate system because our brain is sort of compartmentalized through our blood-brain barrier. And our brain has this lymphatic system, which allows our bodies to remove toxins in our brain and pull them out as well, so we don't have toxic brain space, right? And what they found was that our brain's inflammation from bacteria, active bacteria like Lyme disease, or even just dead bacteria, right? The toxic waste of Lyme bacteria can cause these issues. But additionally, they're finding that if people take sleeping medication like Ambien, for example, they do not activate their lymphatic system, and therefore they have more toxins left in their brain. And they believe that this could lead to more cognitive decline issues like dementia and Parkinson's, right? And we hear that a lot in the Lyme community. So it's interesting that so many Lyme patients have sleep issues. It's super common with insomnia. Many of us have taken sleeping medication, and now we're realizing that our brainstem is not releasing norepinephrine in these small, gradual, intermittent doses that it does when we're in deep REM sleep. And if it's not doing that, then we're not activating our lymphatic system, and therefore we're not detoxing. So I just want to highlight that this insomnia has such a downstream effect on our brain, on our cognitive abilities, and our physical health. And I think we're just starting to understand what that looks like, Presley and Dan. So do either of you want to just kind of weigh in or comment on that? I know I kind of derailed us a little bit from your story, but I just want to highlight some of these fun facts that we're learning. And again, I'm not to scare anybody, just to be aware, because these things shouldn't scare us. They should enlighten us to make informed decisions about how we treat our bodies.
Yeah. Well, I can weigh in. I think I've always been really, I don't know, interested in that because I had a neurologist one time said that even being awake is trauma for your brain because it's sitting there, you're processing your cerebral spinal fluid is constantly getting cleaned and basically replaced. And it's really, really cool what the brain does. And it's just this machine up there that's constantly working. And when you go to sleep, your brain has the ability to then clean itself and cycle out all the old junk. And that's why sleep is so important. And when you start losing sleep, almost everything else goes, right? Like you start making bad decisions. That's another thing, right? You have this brain fog and everything like that too. So for me, in kind of my recovery, when I was able to really start getting sleep and getting rid of brain fog and everything else, I was able to make better decisions and figure out what I needed to do for treatment. So that's huge. Cutting down inflammation, getting sleep. Those are two of the biggest things, I think, if you're just like kind of getting started in your recovery. Those are two really good things to focus on for sure. But
yeah. Presley, can you relate to that? Do you think sleep? I mean, obviously not being able to sleep, you can speak to that. And I could say, in addition to what Dan said, I think it also, from my experience, it makes you more emotional, right? You don't get good sleep consistently. You're not managing your emotions well. Your anxiety will become worse. You'll have just more of these sad feelings, right? So is that something you think you were going through, when you were a young child, 10 to 14, Presley, because your insomnia was so bad?
Yeah, and I even feel like now, like I love reading stuff about the lymphatic system, like your like brain like washing itself every night. And actually, like when I was applying for schools, I got into some schools for like neuroscience because I was thinking, okay, they want to do like molecular biology or neuroscience. But so I was like super interested in the brain. Actually, when I was like sick, I would watch like 2-hour Harvard lectures just like on like the anatomy of the brain. And I feel like a lot of the kind of just like brain hacking and like nervous system stuff to like help me get better because there's like physiological ways like that our nervous system and brain responds. But I definitely feel like I can notice a difference in my sleep. Like even if I don't get 8 hours, I can notice like a complete difference. So like now that I'm able to like fall asleep better and sleep through the night, I really try to prioritize it, like Dan was saying, and like I'm super aware of my body. And I think when you go through these things, like you get really aware of your body and sensations and everything you kind of do. And I definitely notice when I don't get enough sleep, then yeah, I make like worse decisions. I'm maybe more emotional. I can't focus. I feel like more pain. So it's definitely like one of the most important things, and I think it's underrated.
Yeah, and I want everybody listening to know that we're going to get into once we talk about your diagnosis and what you did to treat, we're going to get into what you did to help overcome your insomnia. And look, I don't think insomnia is everybody's going to have some bad sleep nights, right? But you've obviously made huge improvements, and we're going to get into what you did to help, which is a huge step in allowing your body to rest and heal and recover and clean itself, right? Like you mentioned earlier. But before we get there, I also want to talk about, 'cause I think you said earlier, Presley, that you moved and you were exposed to mold before your diagnosis as well. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so we moved and we were literally in this like a temporary house, and when it would rain, like there'd be like literally like water like leaking like from the roof. It was really bad. And also in that same house, I had bed bugs. I had really bad bed bugs, and I had them for about like 4 months, and I was showing my mom like the blood like on the sheets, and I was like, I'm getting bit. She's like, oh, it's just mosquitoes. Like she was like, no way, this is bed bugs. I'd like this is the worst case scenario. But it did end up being bed bugs, which I've heard that bed bugs and like fleas and stuff like that can give you like infections like Lyme. And I have 4 co-infections and then plus Lyme. So I don't know, like I could have gotten also all these infections from like multiple different exposures. But yeah, when I moved and got exposed to mold, got bed bugs, obviously moving is stressful, and I was going through puberty, it was just like my body was like, okay, enough.
Yeah. A book I recommend people reading is Bitten by Chris Newby. And so one of the scientists she spoke to when they were doing weaponization of what he claimed was weaponization of like ticks and fleas and stuff like that. Fleas were one of the vectors they were using to basically drop on other countries, like in theory to drop on other countries to basically make people sick, and then they weaken the force there in that country, and then you can kind of go in there and take over the country. And that was kind of the design that scientist was talking about. Fleas could be also another vector for that as well. So yeah, who knows what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so it's interesting we're having this conversation because there is some controversy over this, like everything in the Lyme community, where we had Thomas Mather, Dr. Thomas Mather, who's one of the leading entomologists from the University of Rhode Island, and he manages their tick encounter center. They study probably more ticks than anybody in the world through that resource center because they test their ticks. They also take the photos and identify them through people for free. But he adamantly said that fleas cannot transmit Lyme because they essentially aren't attached long enough, and they're for a variety of reasons. So we encourage people to listen to that podcast, Dr. Thomas Mather, to hear his view. But then to your point, Dan, another great example would be Chris Newby, right, who we had on the podcast as well. And she was arguing that they were part of the bioweapons experiment, and we did drop infected ticks, on some foreign enemies at the time. And there's some crazy stuff in her book. Everybody should go read that book if they haven't. Bitten, and they should check out that podcast because at the end she dropped some really cool, fun things that she didn't share in the book as well in that podcast interview. But regardless, we do know that fleas have other pathogens that they can transmit. Even if people don't believe they can transmit Lyme, some do, some believe that, some don't. But regardless, you have stress, you have puberty, you're moving, you're exposed to mold, this rainy house, bed bugs, all these things, plus Lyme and 4 co-infections, your body's just fighting to survive at this point. So, how old were you when you were living this moldy environment, being bitten by bed bugs? Like, what age was this for you?
This was like 12, 13. And then when we actually moved, it was like I was 13, 14. And when we moved, it didn't get that much better because we moved into actually another moldy house. But it was like mold coming from the ground. Like it was raised on this like kind of just like dirt, and it was like just like mold on the ground. Like it was not good. And actually when I got the diagnosis and everything like that, and we were like trying to do everything to get me better, we had some people come to like check out our house for mold, and they were like, this is like one of the worst houses we've seen. Like it's so bad. Like you guys need to move out now. And of course, like we didn't move out. My parents didn't really take it that seriously because they're like, oh, mold, like whatever. But yeah, and actually the lady in the house before we moved in, she had like really bad cancer, and I think she ended up like passing away from that. So I don't know if that's related, but that house was definitely very unhealthy to be in.
Yeah, well, we know mold is immune suppressive, and we know mold, depending on the species of mold, can have different psychiatric implications as well. We had Dr. Jill Carnahan on, and I've said this in other interviews, but it just blew me away here in interview, where certain mold species can cause homicidal thoughts. They can cause suicidal thoughts. They can cause depressive thoughts. They can cause anxious thoughts. And depending on the species, we're starting to identify that if you have this mold and we test it and it's this species of mold, you're more likely to have this particular psychological symptom. And you mentioned you were having some psychological symptoms like anxiety and depression and even the insomnia. which can be related to Lyme, but also can be related to mold, right? So was it being a double whammy where the mold plus the Lyme was just causing you to have all these crazy emotions because you were sick with all these bugs in your body, right?
Yeah, and I think that was hard too, like when I was first trying to figure out what was wrong, because I did have a lot of physical symptoms, like a lot of body pain, a lot of fatigue, nerve pain. Like at one point I couldn't walk. But like I also was having, like I was all neurological first, like anxiety, depression, and then my worst symptom was like migraines, just super bad migraines all the time. But when I'd go to see like a pediatric doctor, because I was still like a teenager, they would just be like, "Oh, you're anxious or you're depressed. Like you're too young to be like having all this like symptoms. Like you're just saying that because like you don't feel good mentally." And I think that's like where it gets hard, because it's like mental illness like is physical illness, you know? So like you have this anxiety and depression, but they're just as real as like the joint pain and like the diarrhea and like all those symptoms.
Yeah, question for you, Presley. Do you believe, so we've had varying doctors on, one of them being, Leo Shea the third out of New York, who is one of the leading Lyme neuropsychiatrists, and he believes that every single psychological condition has some sort of pathogenic root cause, right? Meaning it's some sort of bug. Do you think that's an overstatement? Do you think that that's, some are and some aren't? Or are you in that camp where, hey, psychological issues can be addressed by looking at the physiological root cause underneath it?
I mean, I feel like it's like I wouldn't go as far to say that every psychological issue has a bug, because if you had something really traumatic happen and then after that you started having anxiety and depression, then it's probably from that traumatic event, right? But I think when like you have those psychological problems, they can be caused from pathogens. And then if you had trauma and then you're having psychological problems, your immune system's probably down, and then pathogens will get like more prominent in your body. So definitely addressing inflammation, the chemicals in your body and the pathogens in your body, like regardless of what you think is causing it, I think could help. But the same with like, even if you like really are sure that like your anxiety or depression is from Lyme, I still think there are some things you can do like with your nervous system or like psychologically that could help you, that's like not actual like treatment. So I think for both ways, I think the approaches are good.
Wow, extremely well said. And we're going to get into some of those practices you're describing once we get into your diagnosis as far as nervous system regulation and things like that, because I know you have a lot of experience with that stuff. But I think one thing we can all agree on is the mental health community should be more aware of Lyme and tick-borne illnesses because of the overlap. And unfortunately, most people that come on this podcast say their mental health practitioners never think Lyme or tick-borne illness. They always jump to just treating with medication rather than saying, hey, can we test to see if there's some other complication here that can be a contributing factor, right? I mean, the only person that I can remember is we had Ali Hilfiger on the podcast, and she was so bad. Her dad, and if you read her book, you may recall this, her dad put her into an institution, a mental health institution, and there somebody kind of whispered to her, I think you might have Lyme, go follow up with this doctor. And that's how she got her diagnosis. But that is extremely rare. So I'm betting, Presley, none of your doctors suggested Lyme or tick-borne illness that you were seeing for mental health at the time, right?
No, and also like it got to the point where I was seeing doctors for like GI issues or whatever, and they would ask me like, "Are you anxious or depressed?" And I would just have to say no, because if I said that, they're like, "Okay, just get on this antidepressant, just get on this anti-anxiety." Even now, like I was having like this issue with my bladder, and I went to go see a doctor about it, like a urologist, and she was like, "Well, is this making you stressed?" And I was like, well, yeah, my bladder hurts all the time and it's continuing to get worse. And she's like, I think like it'd be beneficial to put you on this antidepressant. And so I think it's really like I have to be like careful about how I approach doctors, because it's really sad that if they see like a young person and they look at you on the outside and they're like, oh, they're just like anxious or depressed and that's what's causing this. I mean, it definitely comes with both, like whether you're anxious and depressed and then you have physical issues, or you're anxious and depressed because of your physical issues, that's definitely significant. But like putting you just like on an antidepressant is not like the root cause, you know?
Yes, let's recap your symptoms, right? So now you're 13, 14, you have these crazy headaches and migraines, physical body pain, GI issues, insomnia, anxiety, night sweats, nightmares. You had the fatigue. I think you had light and sound sensitivity as well, right? That
Yeah,
developed later on.
That came with the migraines. Like my worst symptom was like the migraines with came like it was just this insane like head pressure and pain, and it was constant. Like one day, like in eighth grade, I just woke up with a headache and it literally like never went away. Like it didn't go away for like 4.5 years. And it was like this constant head pain that I could never get rid of. And then with that came sensitivity to light and sound. So it came to a point where I was just in a dark room with ice packs on my head all the time, like dark, quiet, like unable to do anything. Cause like I would say head pain and then nerve pain are like the most debilitating like pain syndromes. And like if you have like head pain, like you just can't like do anything. It's so hard to do things.
If you're comfortable, I want to speak about, in your pre-interview questionnaire, you mentioned that you had irregular periods. And again, we can move
Yeah.
on if this is an uncomfortable topic, but so many females that come on this podcast speak about early symptoms of Lyme around their menstrual cycle and their hormones, right? And generally we hear from the doctors and the patients that a lot of this is rooted around inflammation, but it's an earlier sign and symptom that something is wrong. So are you comfortable speaking about this before we move on? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So was that your experience? And if so, do you think that was like a warning sign of things to come?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I first got my period at 13 and then like it was never regular, but they say like for the first 1 to 2 years, like it doesn't have to be regular. So I don't think anyone was really paying attention to it. But then like at the age of 16, I lost my period for like a year and a half because my body was just so stressed that I couldn't make any hormones, right? Like the last thing my body's thinking about is like getting pregnant. So I just like lost my period for a while and then I was trying to like supplement progesterone and it wasn't coming back. And then yeah, I would like come back for like a month or two and leave. So I mean I wasn't complaining that I wasn't getting my period because I was like I don't need one more thing, but I think my body was under so much stress that I couldn't have it. And then finally when I was getting better, I was like getting it more regularly. And I think that was like a sign that like my body was like regulating and being more healthy and balanced.
Yeah, I want to take a moment to tell everybody if you're in that part of your Lyme journey where you're struggling with any of these things, look at Presley as an example. We're not there yet, but she's indicated and already said that she's been able to overcome a lot of these, and even with her menstrual cycle and her inflammation, that once you heal and get deeper root cause based treatments, you will bounce back. And I don't care how long you've been sick for, right? We've seen that in so many people on this podcast, and we're going to see it in a little bit with Presley as well. So I just wanted to make sure we share that piece of it. So let's talk about now your diagnosis, because I know you got diagnosed when you were 14, and we kind of been talking around that. What put Lyme on your mind, and when did you get your diagnosis?
Okay, so actually shout out to my really good friends, Julie and Rich. They have a daughter who has Lyme and they're involved with the Global Lyme Alliance. And they were telling my parents, they're like, you got to get Presley tested for this. Like, my friend Rich, he does like a lot of like business with my dad. And my dad was like his close business friends, he was talking to them about this because it's obviously very hard for my parents to watch me go through. And he was like I already tested like for Lyme through Children's, but it's just a shitty test. And they were like, no, you have to like pay for this IGeneX test and like get this right test. Like you have to do it. And they were like, no, like that's not it, whatever. So my parents finally did it. And then of course I tested positive. I think I had like 4 or 5 bands. And then after that, I think I immediately got on antibiotics. But my parents didn't really know what to go from there. And so after that, I was referred to go to like Invita in Arizona. And then there they tested for everything. And then they saw that I had 4 other co-infections. But the original diagnosis of Lyme was July 2020. And then I went to Invita, I think in August 2020, and then got all the other diagnoses and then just started kind of just like treating it right then and there. But it was like we didn't know where to start. And there was so much information about it, like controversial information. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that it wasn't a doctor, right? Oh, sorry, Dan. I think I interrupted you.
Oh no, sorry. I was gonna what were some of the other diagnoses for the co-infections that you ended up getting in Vita?
Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, and Anaplasma.
No kidding. That is a brutal mix.
Yeah. So I had that, and then I'm trying to think what else. Like I had a lot of autoimmunes diagnosed like within different periods because I think within like my whole journey, different pathogens were more significant and they would go up and down. So I had Sjogren's syndrome diagnosed, Pott's syndrome, mast cell activation, Burkitt's syndrome. Um, I'm trying to think what else, but definitely a lot of autoimmunes. I didn't pay as much attention to those because I feel like they kind of just followed like what the root cause was. Because like in immunology and autoimmunity, like you're having this autoimmunity because your body's like trying to attack something so much it starts attacking itself. Um, but yeah, I definitely had a lot of autoimmunes and then those like 5 pathogenic diagnoses.
Yeah, I want to credit you and your family for listening to Julie and Rich because a lot of people on this podcast tell us that friends and family members or colleagues will suggest Lyme, but their doctors say no way. And they put it off because they put all their trust in their doctor and don't take any credence from, their friend or social relationship, advice about Lyme disease. I mean, Phyllis Bedford coined this on the podcast. Rich says it all the time. She says Lyme disease diagnosis is generally a grocery store diagnosis, right? And what she means is she bumped into somebody in the grocery store and that's how her family member got diagnosed with Lyme disease. And that's very common. We hear that on this podcast all the time. So, that's another important takeaway. Just because you're struggling, it doesn't mean you can't listen to somebody else and get tested for what they're suggesting, even though they're not a doctor, right? Obviously, work with your doctor, partner with your doctor, but be open to all possibilities about what could be going on. So Invita Clinic is we've had some guests on this podcast that have treated with Invita, and we've heard varying things about them, but they do a lot. They do a pretty diverse set of treatments, and they have a pretty good team there. So can you describe what that was like so you actually went on site. This is like you go on campus, right? Like you kind of go and stay there, I believe. Presley, is that correct?
We rented an Airbnb, but I was there for like 7 hours a day. Yeah. I mean, the experience for me, I felt like the doctors were more validating than my doctors at home because my pediatrician in California, she was like, Lyme doesn't even exist in California. When I told her my diagnosis, she printed out a paper about how Lyme like isn't real, like it doesn't cause symptoms. So that was like just very invalidating. But again, like the doctors at Invita, they have such a like rigid protocol. And it was just making me feel worse literally the entire time I was there. And I feel like I wasn't very like listened to because again, I was like young and they were like, okay, you just need to power through and do this treatment. It didn't end up really helping me. I was there for 3 months. What ended up helping me at the end of treatment, they were like, okay, we did 3 months of treatment, like not a lot of improvement. You should try ketamine infusions. Because at this point, like I was at the worst place in my life. Like I couldn't walk because every time I would stand up, like I had such bad nerve pain on the bottom of my feet. It felt like broken glass and just like constant headaches, weakness, all this stuff. So they recommended that I do ketamine, and that's like that was legal to do like in Arizona, like ketamine infusions. So I did those, and that helped my nerve pain and helped me get out of the wheelchair. But at the end of like the 3 months when I went back home, there was like not a lot of improvement. So I didn't really like the experience I had there, but I know it's helped some people.
Presley, did you use, I think they call it the IRAD, right? The insulin receptor antibiotic delivery. So it's sort of
Yeah.
a very specialized way that's supposed to optimize the effectiveness of antibiotics against tick-borne illness. So you said yes, you did do that?
I did do that and I didn't see much improvement from it. If anything, it was kind of scary. I had like 2 friends that I knew from there who went into seizures from it because it is kind of scary because they're messing with your insulin and they're basically like they would tell us, okay, let us know when you're about to black out. Like, and it's like, okay, like, is this really like that safe and is this like worth it? But like when you're so sick and trying to get better, like you'll do anything. But I feel like the benefit risk needs to be more evaluated.
Talk to us about the ketamine because one of the first people that I met with chronic Lyme disease locally that lives a town over did a ketamine treatment before she had her diagnosis and said it helped her, but that it was very similar to your experience, right? It helped her, but it didn't really get her recovered. And, learning what I've learned over the last 5 years, I think ketamine is a really good tool to help repair some of our neural pathways that have been damaged from Lyme. and almost reset our brains, not from a psychological standpoint, but from a legitimate brain pathway standpoint, right? I mean, we've had a lot of Amen Clinic doctors on this podcast, some brilliant Amen Clinic doctors. And if you look on their website, you'll see a normal brain scan, right? That they have these specialized scans. And then you'll see a Lyme brain. And the Lyme brain activity is significantly different than a normal healthy brain. And I think that's because of the bacteria, the infections, right? The bacteria alters our brain pathways, plus all the trauma that we go through alters our brain pathways. And I think ketamine really helps reset or reboot our brains to a normal pathway environment. But I'm curious, Presley, what your thoughts are on ketamine and why it helped you.
Yeah, I felt like that too. And I feel like chronic illnesses are so complex because some people get a chronic illness from an original trauma, like getting hit by a car, and like they don't have an infection, but they're in constant pain. And then with people with infections, it's like the infection caused the pain, but then the pain being there's like this constant pain signal. And so it's a mix of like these pain, like brain pathways that are overfiring and that have been like overfiring for a while, and that it's actually like your body is inflamed and unhealthy. So I feel like that's why ketamine's not like a silver bullet treatment, because there is infection that needs to be treated. But I felt like it helped because there is overactive pain pathways with anyone with infection or like chronic pain, because the longer you have a pain signal, the more sensitive it's going to be and the stronger it's going to be. So even people with chronic pain, like could be like more sensitive to touch or just like more sensitive to light or sound, because your brain is just so like overactive and your limbic system is turned on. So that's why I felt like ketamine helped the nerve pain and just some of the pain. And I think that's why they recommend it like after treatment, because sometimes if you're not feeling better after treatment, even if you have a lower pathogenic load, it's just because your brain kind of needs that reset of like I'm actually healthier, and this like the pain signals are very real and very there. They're just like there because they've been there for so long. So I think it helps like any pain signals that aren't necessarily like necessary anymore.
Yeah, and I also think that, oftentimes we like to think like cause and effect, right? So this drug or this treatment does this thing, but we don't think about a couple of layers down. So I always wonder something like ketamine, for example, that resets the neural pathways, decreases the pain signals to our physical bodies. That has an important effect. We're going to be able to sleep better. We're going to be able to take our bodies out of fight or flight in our nervous system state, which we never can heal. We're going to get worse if we're in a constant state of fight or flight. And I think ketamine helps greatly with that. So by putting ourselves in a more rest and digest state with our nervous system, we're allowing our immune systems to do what they were designed to do, which is kill the bad things and help regulate our body. So just because it's not an actual direct kill treatment, I don't think that ketamine can't be effective indirectly to help manage Lyme and reduce the pathogenic load by helping calm down the brain, calm down the pain signals, and calm down our nervous system. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you need both. And I think that's what people miss in treatment. They're like, I just need to treat it and kill it and like do that all the time. And that's what I was doing for so long. But you actually need things to also like decrease your histamine, decrease your inflammation, decrease your pain so you can feel safe enough in your body so that you can sleep, you can heal. And that's why I don't really like when doctors are like, let's just like go out at full throttle and you're gonna herx and feel a lot worse, but it'll be worth it. Because sometimes like the herx, like even if you have lower pathogen level, just like being in more pain or having that like just that much like symptoms and like being uncomfortable is like worse for you because it's stressful. So I feel like you need to come at it like with both angles.
Mhm.
One thing I would say about the ketamine though is it was a very like unpleasant experience because it is a psychedelic. And you know when people say like don't do psychedelics if you're in a really bad place. And that's how it was for me. Like I was obviously in a very bad place mentally. And I was also 14 and I didn't know that it was going to make me like super like high out of my mind. But ketamine is also very like chemical. It feels very like chemical and like everything's glitching. And
Yeah.
to actually get it to be effective, you have to do these really high dose IVs. And it helped, but it was like not a very pleasant experience. And also I know that sometimes like the high doses can like get people into like these things called like K-holes. And so it's definitely like you have to be careful like how like what your limit is like mentally. But yeah, I definitely think doing those things to help your mind, to help your pain, like through the process of treatment so that you're like actually regulated and feeling okay mentally, because like I think people who have Lyme are some of the strongest people ever, mentally and physically, but we are just like humans, and like treating it's very hard, and feeling bad all the time is very hard. So like doing things to make yourself feel better mentally and physically, even if it's like a slower treatment instead of like a more like rigorous treatment, I feel like that's the better way to go.
Yeah. And something to add a little bit too. And Preston, you've probably heard me say this 1,000 times, but people ask like, what did you do to help you recover? I was like, I did like 100 things consistently.
Yeah.
And one thing I thought about too, just sitting here listening to you to discuss this, one of the things I think that was very helpful for me early on was I was getting weekly and even twice a week massage therapy. Like I was just going to getting massages done, and just like my fascia worked and stretched and all these things. And then I was on a really low histamine, low inflammation, like elimination diet, right? So like I was doing just so many things. And I agree, Presley. Sometimes herxing that bad can just set you back. And
And
it's
it's traumatic.
yeah, it's brutal.
And
Yeah.
that's why, like, it, like, when I was telling doctors, like, I actually can't do this, like, I'm feeling so awful. And they're like, no, like, this is the protocol. You just need to get through it. Like, that's a huge red flag, you know? And I feel like you need to work with your doctor to a point where, yes, you're getting to, like, a place where you're effectively, like, treating it, but, like, you need to feel like you can tolerate it and that you're safe and that you're doing things like massages or like just things that make you like happy and actually feel relaxed and feel good, because sometimes some treatments are just so intense and so hard and traumatic, and that stress in your mind and that stress in your body, like it isn't worth it, you know? And it, if anything, I feel like it just like mitigates the effect of the treatment if it's like that stressful and traumatic and painful for your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I mean, again, Invita does a lot. Was there anything else that Invita did that's worthwhile to share that's sort of interesting or different than the normal experience? I understand it didn't really help you much, but is there anything else that's noteworthy before we move away from the Invita topic?
Yeah, they did apheresis, which is like the cycling of your like circulating your blood through this like machine, and it kind of filters all of it. I'm not sure how helpful that is, because I feel like once you have a chronic infection, it goes into your tissues and your muscles, and it's not really like super active in your blood. They did lots of high dose IVs. They did ozone. They did methylene blue, which I think is really good. And then they also like had you go get like colonics, lymphatic massage, acupuncture. They did antibiotic IVs. I mean, it was just like a lot of treatment. But again, like I think sometimes that much treatment is just like a lot for your body. And yeah, it's very aggressive. It's very hard. But they definitely have some good things that they do there.
Yeah, so some of these tools obviously you mentioned are helpful, but it was just too much for an overwhelmed toxic body, and it was that in your experience it was just way too much for you. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on methylene blue, because we've had a lot of people say they've had great success on meth blue. We've even had some doctors say that they're actually doing methylene blue in smaller levels, like they're almost like microdosing it, or they're doing it like really, really tiny levels and gradually moving up for people that are more, I'd say, sensitive to methylene blue. So what are your thoughts on on meth blue specifically?
I think it can be a really good treatment, like without any like a lot of side effects, because it's like a natural, like antimicrobial, antifungal, like it does a lot of great things. I definitely think it can make you like herx really bad. So with anything, I always just say like just it's better to like ease into it. Like even with herbal, sometimes still I'll just start with one drop, you know, because um it's better to just like, especially with like mast cell as well, like sometimes like it's like, is it a herx or is it also just like my body being sensitive to things? So I think it's a great option, just like anything, like ease into it, like microdose with it. Even there's this medication I'm taking for my bladder right now, and it actually has methylene blue in it, so I think there's actually like um evidence like for it to be a good like medication. And like I think it helps with a lot of things because a lot of people's problems like come from like these microbes, and it's such a like wide range like antimicrobial that it helps with a lot of things.
So now post and Vita, you still weren't doing that great. You had ketamine helped a little bit. What were your next steps? And were you moving on to another doctor? What were you and your family discussing at this time?
Yeah, so I went back to live in California, and then I had to start my school online. I missed a whole year of high school. So from then on, I did summer school, and then I was doing my whole school online because I still like had to be in a dark room, just to like walk to the kitchen was like all I had the energy for. I started doing hyperbaric oxygen treatments for like 3 months or something. But then I got like this weird thing happen with my lungs. Sometimes you can get like my lungs were still developing at that point and it was like too much pressure. And so I had this like internal like burning of my lungs. So I had to like stop that. And then I was seeing some homeopathic doctors. And then I was with Dr. Schickman. I saw him in San Diego for like 2 years. I did like I think they're called exosomes. They were like stem cells. I did ozone. I was doing just a bunch of different treatments. I did SOT. Like Dan was saying, I was literally doing so many things. So I didn't know what was making me feel worse. I didn't know what was making me feel better. I just like was doing so many things at the same time, because I was just so desperate to get better. But all the treatment that I did in the US, really nothing significantly helped. And so that's when we were looking about doing treatment outside of the US in 2023.
So I guess you kind of answered the question already, but because you were doing so many things concurrently, you couldn't answer the question if SLT were effective or not because there were so many things in play that in the end you can just tell us you weren't feeling much better, but you're not really sure, if one of them in isolation would have been helpful, even in a slight amount, correct?
Yeah, no, I was doing so many things. And then also, I was still living in a moldy environment. And I was just like, it seemed like if anything helped, like it was getting canceled out by something else. So I'm not saying like any of these treatments don't work, but like I was just not seeing any improvement from them.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, right? If we would have removed you from that moldy environment, would one of those things potentially have helped you, right? And so it's impossible to really tell. But walk us through now. You've basically exhausted all of your American-based doctors and treatments, and you're looking outside of America. I guess what even put that on your radar that there are clinics outside of the U.S. that can do things above and beyond? And then once you knew that, how did you identify where to go?
Yeah, so I'd heard about hyperthermia in Germany like early on in my Lyme disease journey, but I was like, there's no way I can make it to Germany. Like I can barely drive in the car with my mom to a doctor's appointment. Like I'm in so much pain. Like there's no way I'm going to Germany. And so I said to my parents, there is no way. But like my parents were like honestly willing to do anything for me at this point, and we had like money and resources to do anything. So they wanted like to go out and look at that. But I found this practitioner, Michelle McKeon, and she was like a nutritionist, and she was also specializing in Lyme and mold. And I found her like on Instagram or like through a podcast or something. So I was like constantly researching this. And I set up some consults with her, and then we were talking about supplements, nutrition, and then she brought up Sanaviv, which is this clinic in Mexico that does the hyperthermia. And I think they actually do it better in Germany than Germany because in Mexico they keep your head like outside of the like hyperthermia tent. In Germany, your head is inside, and sometimes when your head is inside the tent, like your corneas can burn. It's so hot. So I think there's less of a language barrier, first of all. It was closer and they do it more safely. So then I started talking to my parents about that, and then my parents were like all on for it. But at this point, I'd done so much treatment, been so through so many traumatic experiences with doctors and treatment centers, and just going through these like really hard traumatic like treatments that were just like honestly, I was like I don't know if I can do it, like because it's very hard to go and treat it because you feel worse and it's just like so not fun. So I was really thinking about it. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna go and do it because I was at the point where it's like I didn't even really care if I was oh, I'm doing treatment in Mexico, like that's sketchy. Like some people are like, oh, like how are you not worried? I was like I'm either gonna get better or like die trying. Like I didn't really care if I died or not. And that sounds bad, but it was like 4 years of just like this constant misery. And I would think to myself, I know people with Lyme think this, like people with other illnesses like cancer, like terminal illnesses, like at least they get to suffer and then like die. But with Lyme, it's like you're like miserable. Like it'll just keep you miserable, but you won't die. It's like the weirdest thing. You'll feel like you're dying, but you're not. So I was like, you know what? Like I'm gonna go try this because I have nothing to lose, basically.
I agree. I'll add to that real quick. I actually went out and I was so sick, but I still went out camping and hiking all across the country. I was like, if I'm gonna die, it's gonna be doing something I enjoy. So
Yeah.
like I was miserable, but I was like kind of pushing myself, and the outdoors actually helped a whole bunch, and that's kind of how I changed that. But I can definitely agree, and not a lot of people, I think, Presley, who've been through what kind of all of us have been through, really understand that kind of that thought process, unfortunately. But
Yeah. And even people, when they hear that you have Lyme, like they don't think it can be that bad. Like when someone hears that someone has this disease, it's like super recognized, like cancer or whatever, they're like, oh my gosh, like, or like you can actually see something. And then when it's Lyme, it's like hard for people to like understand. And so
yeah.
that too is like, it just feels like, I feel like very invalidating. So then we like kind of hide like how we're feeling even more because it's like not that validated.
Yeah, even my doctor, my primary care physician, I remember sitting there, and one time I was in the hospital, my O2 levels were dropping in the 80s, and they're like, "Well, all your labs are really good," and they're just kind of, if it gets worse or you have a hard time, you just come back. And there's another time I was there with my primary care physician. I was like, "Yeah, I'm just telling him all the things I had going on." I was like, "Look how stretchy my skin is," and like he's like, "Oh my gosh," he's like, "I've never seen that before." So it's just they see these things, they witness it, but if your labs are good and you seem kind of with it, like they just dismiss you completely. It
Yeah.
is one of the toughest things I think a lot of us go through, unfortunately. So,
Yeah, and I'm very happy to hear that I didn't from doing our research on you, to be honest, Presley, we found a lot of things, but I didn't make the connection between you and Michelle McKeon. And we absolutely love her. She's been on this podcast years ago. We've had her come back and co-host. She's one of our favorite people. And there's nobody better than her from a hyperthermia standpoint, a mold standpoint, an MCAS standpoint, to be real a good coach and guider, of people on their journey. So that makes me very happy to hear that connection was forged. So it sounds like you moved forward and went to Sanofi. Is that correct?
I did, yeah, and I went there in January for 2 weeks. Honestly, it was probably the best treatment center experience that I ever had. People were very nice there, and it's just very important to me, like when I'm telling people, like with their Lyme journey, like make sure you're with doctors who listen to you, and who are gonna like do things like special for you, because we all know there is not like people get better in so many different ways, and that's why it's so hard. So if you're with a doctor who's like, well, I do this protocol for everything, like red flag. So the doctors there really individualize the protocol, and they listen to you. They don't want you to suffer. They want you to get the most out of it. They want to make sure that it's actually the infection that's causing it. They won't just be like I had like a series of interviews before I went down there, and they were making sure that it was the Lyme and that this is the right treatment for me. So they're not trying to sell you anything. It was a really, really great experience. So, and even like after the hyperthermia, they have you in a room recovering, like you're on pain meds. It's not that like uncomfortable. So yeah, I did hyperthermia there. I did ozone, hyperbaric. They had like frequency machines. You get to see a psychologist every day and do talk therapy. And then they really set you up when you're going home. Um, so yeah, I did the hyperthermia and then I went home, and I would say I started feeling better. I did it in January and I started really feeling better like in May. And they say like also when you go home to like take a break from treatments, which I like too, because constantly treating, like that's hard for your kidneys and your body and all this stuff. So like going through a big treatment and then like taking a break and like letting your body just like do its thing, I think is really important. So they emphasize that. So yeah, I had an overall like really positive experience. And then also with Michelle, she helped me like going there and then like coming back, and like just like everything was very smooth and just like kind of tailored to me, which was really good.
What was kind of the process of getting down there? Did you fly, or how did you get there?
So it was literally like an hour drive from where I live in San Diego. So we
Mhm.
went to this hotel. They have a bunch of people that they pick up like in this van, and then they just drive us down there, like their drivers. It's like in this gated property. It looks like a hotel, but it's like a hospital.
Yeah.
It's super nice. It's on the water. No one's really allowed to leave, so you're very safe. And yeah, that was the process of going there, and then the same going back. Like they just drove us back. And then people like from the hotel, they would either fly back, but I just like drove home.
Yeah. Very cool. And then who went with you for the treatment down there?
So for my first week, I was with my mom, and then my second week, I was with one of Michelle's friends, Christina, it was really good to be there with her because she'd done hypothermia herself in Germany, and then her daughter, who was like around my age, had done it as well. So not only did she like get better from it, and like that was like super inspiring for me to like see, like I was like, okay, a lot of people have gotten better from this, but she kind of already knew like the things to do, how to help. So she actually, I think, still is with Michelle, and she goes down to Mexico with people to do that, to just help them.
Awesome.
So
What's the
yeah.
accommodations like for like when your mom went down there? How do they have guests come with you?
So it's like a room, and there's like a small room like inside the room with like a twin bed, and then there's like a queen bed.
Yeah.
So I was just like in the room with the twin bed because it's like closed off and it was like darker. So yeah, there's like two beds in one room.
Very cool. Awesome. But
So now you I'm curious, like once you're back though, right? So you're there, you do all of these things, and we've heard this too. So this is very consistent with what we've heard on this podcast and just from speaking to people that Santa Vive is a very good clinic. They don't just focus on the pathogens, they're really just whole body, right? Like you mentioned, they do detox, they do mental health, they do physical health, they hit it from multiple angles. And the staff there is extremely passionate and kind and caring. So, you're not the first person to tell us that, and I'm happy to hear you had a very good experience. But what is it like when you leave? Because there has to be follow-up, right? What you have questions and things like that. Is there any kind of communication after you leave the clinic with Santa Vive again, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I think you have like free consultations with a doctor for like a year after. Honestly, the it took me a little while to feel better, and the doctors weren't super helpful with that. Like I kind of had to figure some things out on my own when I got home, especially because I was like still kind of worried about pathogens, and they were like, "We'll do like a CPR test." Which I don't know why they did that, because they knew it was going to come out negative, because when you have chronic infections, they're not going to be like necessarily circulating out through your blood. So like why would you like take your blood and then like like incubate it and like watch for something to grow, or like CPR it. So I thought that, like looking back on that, I was like, that was kind of stupid that we paid for that, and like that they just basically did that to say, oh, like hyperthermia worked, and like we don't really know like why you're not feeling better. So that was like a little unhelpful. But they basically said like, oh, just continue to give it time. Um, but it's definitely a little stressful, like coming back home and doing such a big, intense treatment and being like, okay, when am I gonna feel better? Like you're just kind of like sitting, waiting, and you're just stressing, especially like after doing all these treatments. Like I was very stressed about if it was gonna work. So I was like, I don't know if I have the will or strength to do more treatments after this. Like I'm done with treatments. So while I was kind of just like waiting, um Michelle recommended, it was either her or actually no, I started going to this other doctor online, Jabon Moore, and he does a lot of parasite cleansing, because as well, another downside to going to Mexico, we were eating like salads there every day. And when I came home, I was having just really bad diarrhea. I was like, okay, something's wrong. So I found this parasite doctor. I started doing the parasite cell core cleanses, and I started like pooping out these huge worms. And I had never had something like that. And I was like, okay, did I just get like tapeworms from Mexico? Like, what the fuck? So I was like, I was kind of upset, but I was like working with him, and then he recommended that I did like this program called Primal Trust. So I started this program, and it was really helpful for like the PTSD I was feeling about being sick, the stress, the nervous system. So I feel like coming back from Santa Vive, the combination of working on my parasite gut stuff, which did I get that from Santa Vive? Did I already have it? I don't know, but I was working on that, and there's very much worms coming out of me. And then also doing nervous system work was like super helpful in like getting me from that point to like, oh, I feel a little better from the hyperthermia to like, oh, I feel tons better.
Yes, I could say there's so many parallels here. We've had Dr. Jaban Moore on the podcast as well, and he is definitely an expert when it comes to parasites. So I'm glad you found him and he was helpful. And Primal Trust, we've interviewed a lot of Primal Trust essentially being like a neuroplasticity, right, brain rewiring program. We've had a lot of these people on the podcast, and I have to tell you, I absolutely love Dr. Kathleen King, who is the founder of Primal Trust. I mean, brilliant. So can you talk to us about the things that you have done and now implemented in your daily life, right? Because you kind of talked about all the things you've done to get yourself to where you are today, which is significantly improved. But as part of that, there are things we have to just integrate into our lives to live healthy lifestyles. So you mentioned brain hacking, sleep improvements, this neuroplasticity stuff you're talking about. So what are these things you now implement into your daily life that you've learned from your research and your practitioners?
For sure. Well, first thing I want to start off with is I definitely like Primal Trust, like out of all the other programs, because I did DNRS as well. And it's just very, I feel like with the chronic illness community, it's you have to be very careful and sensitive because some of these programs, like there is stuff going on in your head, like negative belief systems and like things that like a normal healthy person wouldn't have, but that doesn't mean it's your fault that you're sick. So I feel like some of these programs kind of have a like I would like watch these videos and it'd make me feel like shit because I was like, oh, it's making them seem like I have this like thing in my head and it's making me sick. But I felt like with Primal Trust, it wasn't that at all. And it was such a good experience. And it wasn't like invalidating at all. It was just like you can work on these things to help yourself feel better. And so that's one of the things that was like one of the most helpful things that I implemented because with being so sick, you do get these just negative ways of thinking that kind of protect yourself. Like one of the beliefs I remember having, which was like super interesting when I recognized it. And like how I would start this is like with just awareness and like loving compassion and not judging yourself for having these. But I remember like anytime I'd feel better, I wouldn't be able to enjoy it or I'd just be so like afraid because I like remember I'd feel better and do too much and feel worse. So I thought that it would be better to feel bad all the time than to feel a little better and feel bad again because that feeling better and then feeling bad again was just so like disappointing and sad. So anytime I felt better, I was so stressed. And obviously that's like gonna make me feel bad and then gonna make me like do things that like aren't beneficial for me. So I recognize that pattern, and obviously healthy people don't have that pattern. And I recognized that I had this pattern in my head that it was so easy to be sick, that like there's constantly so many things that can make me sick. So I had to kind of like change that to like my body is like always like leaning towards being healthy because when you're sick it's so easy to think oh my body's so easily always like put down and sick, but actually like studying biology, like our bodies are literally made to be healthy, and like you were saying, no matter how sick you have gotten, you can be 100% healthy again because our bodies have this internal homeostasis that they're always working towards all the time. So I had to realize like with my logic and like with science, like that's what helped me realize it and like implement the belief that no, health is actually like my natural state. And there are a lot of things that can make me sick, but like my body has like evolved over all these years and is so like it's meant to be healthy and resilient. So she talks about that. But one of the things that really helped me like move through just these negative, um, like scary thoughts that I had like from being sick, is like EFT tapping. So I'd first like journal, but journal about like what I'm thinking and being aware of my patterns. But this was a practice that I implemented every day that like I could do like regardless of like how my treatment changed. It really helped me. So like EFT tapping, and you can look that up on like YouTube or Google. Brad Yates is a really good one for EFT tapping, but it's basically tapping like these meridian points, being aware of what you're feeling and then releasing it and kind of putting in a better like system of truth. And it's also just very good for stress. Like they've proven that like tapping on these points are really good for like releasing stress. It's like acupressure basically. So that's what helped me like kind of overcome some of like just like the way our brain gets conditioned from being sick just to survive. Because our brain just doesn't want to it doesn't want to like feel bad, or and it like doesn't want to, it's hard to like feel better and then feel bad and like change and all this stuff. So that was very helpful. And then also functional neurology eye exercises is something that you can like literally take 5 minutes to do, and it helped my pain so much, and I was so surprised that it helped my pain. But if you just look that up on Google, it's like how you move your eyes, and it directly like affects your vagus nerve. So I felt vagus nerve stimulation was super easy, but these things are like super helpful and easy to do. You can implement into your life. And then another thing that she talks about in Primal Trust is like this visualization process for helping PTSD. Because when you're so sick, it's hard to remember that you were ever healthy and that you will be healthy again. And so it's this visualization process of having a good memory and then creating a good memory. And in the beginning, I was like, it was so hard for me to think of a good memory. I was like, when can I think of a time that I actually felt good? Because my brain was so hyper focused on all the bad things that happened, because that's just how it was. It was hell for like this many period of years. So you have to like recondition your brain to being like, no, I actually was healthy and I will be healthy again, even though this happened to me. So she talks about that, but basically you think of a memory and you say it out loud as if it's happening like right now. Like if I had a good memory when I was young of me on the beach, I'd be like, I can feel the sand. My body feels healthy and energized. I'm laughing with my sister. And then you pick a color for this memory and allow it to move through your body and feel how your body felt in that memory. Like, and it's hard at first because you're like, how does being healthy even feel? You forget how it feels, and that's so sad. But it helps your brain be like, oh, wait, wait, wait. Like I was healthy, and that's like real thing, and that's a possibility for me. And then you pick a visualization, like say I wanted to travel and do something. I would say it as if it's happening right now, how it would feel if that would happen, and then picking that color, moving it through your body, and doing those practices. Like I try to do them like every day, and I was doing them like twice a day at first, when I started the program. But doing those practices with the treatments and everything really helped not only like my brain rewire, but also like my nervous system regulate and calm down. And both those things, like, yes, of course, like working on your thoughts is very important, but also like having your like your body actually relax, like doing vagus nerve somatic exercises is important as well, and like making yourself feel safe and okay.
That was brilliant. I mean, you just gave us so much in that answer. Amazing, right? So, is there anything else? I mean, I don't know if there possibly can be anything else. But is there anything else from an anxiety standpoint, or an insomnia, anxiety, or common things that Lyme patients experience that helped you significantly overcome those hurdles?
Um, well, the primal trust was really good. And then I mean meditation is good, but also like be aware that like every practice is different for some people. Like meditation was helpful for me at like some periods in my journey, but other periods it would be make me too aware of the pain and then I'd be too stressed. So it's also like helpful to know that like you know what you feel, and like you know yourself best. And so like researching and hearing all this stuff, like just I would always like say take things with a grain of salt and do what you feel is best for you, even if you don't know why, like just like what makes you feel the best. But meditation was helpful. The EFT, journaling, functional neurology exercises, the visualization, and honestly just like prayer. I felt like through my whole journey, I like grew up Christian, but I felt like I got like kind of less like religious but closer to God. And people don't really know what that means, but I feel like I got less out of like the whole like doing this like black and white like blah 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 like doing what the Bible says, and more just like close with my relationship with God, because I realized that like um just I was with myself so much, and I was like connected to God so much and praying so much. And I realized that like we're all like created by God, and that like we're all meant to be healthy, and we're meant to like be in the state of love. And so really just praying and knowing that there's a higher power, and like just letting go sometimes of like the why, because it's so hard when you think like, why am I having to go through this suffering and whatever, and just letting go, knowing that it's for a reason, and that there's a higher power, and that you're not alone, and you're going to get through this, and like God is guiding you and leading you, there's people around you, and like you're going to be okay. That is like that was super helpful for me, because Lyme can feel super isolating, like you're doing it all by yourself. So sometimes just trusting that I don't know how I'm going to get better, but I am.
Mm.
And just having that sense of like okayness, like seeing your illness and like detaching it, being like not saying like my Lyme or my illness, just being like, this is an experience that I'm having. It's not me. I'm health. I'm love. I'm divinely created. And this experience will go. Everything comes and goes. Everything's temporary and doesn't have to define me. And knowing that, like for whatever reason, like it was meant to happen, and you're gonna get through it. That was very just like a life lesson, and that can be like applied to anything, but especially like when you lose your health, like I feel like you have to go kind of inwards, and like when you get to know yourself better, I feel like it's the same with like God, like you get to know God better, because like God lives within you and God created you. And so that was just very helpful for me, just like praying and then being thankful. Like I'm so thankful still. Like I will never like have the same perspective and outlook on life, because I'm just so thankful to just be in the light and to walk and for all these things, because I just know how it was to basically lose everything, because health is everything. And I was telling Dan this, but I could still like someone could offer me $1 billion on my health, and I would choose my health all the time, because you can't live a good life without your health. So it's definitely very important. Um, but yeah, I would just say praying, being thankful, meditating, primal trust stuff. That's all like a huge part in like the shift and how like you love yourself and move forward with your life, because it's a very hard thing going through Lyme and all this stuff. So there's just ways in which we have to like learn these life lessons and live differently. But I feel like everyone kind of goes through that in their own way, and we just like learn it like very early from all this stuff. So with the treatment, like making all those shifts and just making all those like kind of changes to who you are and how you think is like very helpful.
Yeah, I had so you and I have actually spoken about this a little bit, and actually even within the Bible, like it's more about that personal relationship. The more you read it and the more you get into it, and that personal relationship, and you talk about kind of gratitude. And one thing I did, I started doing this when I was 16, prior to being sick. I'd wake up every day, say, "Thank you, Lord, for another day." I've always been so thankful. I've always had that gratitude. So when you have that gratitude first thing in the morning, it helps so much. And then, Presley, were there any specific prayers or thoughts you would have that really kind of helped you get through it?
I would just pray. Like I like praying for like things in my highest good, like it'll work out in my highest good. And then also like actually this book that I have is really good. It has a lot of prayers in it. It's called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy.
Mm.
But there is a lot of things like in our mind that like can like either perpetuate or like make things better, Like so I think realizing that like you can kind of control the things that are in your control, and kind of let the rest work out is like a good thing to do. But I didn't really have any specific prayers, just honestly just reflecting, being grateful, and just talking to God too. I think sometimes people think God is like this scary like person who's going to judge you, but it's honestly the opposite. Just like saying anything you feel and just kind of just releasing it to a higher power is so powerful, you know? And even like in science, like they like people who get heartbroken sometimes have this like this syndrome where their heart like like closes because like from the emotions, like emotions are so powerful.
Strong.
So being able
Mhm.
to like um to let go of like how hard Lyme is and like how like traumatic it is, let go to a higher power, like you don't know why this is happening, but just like kind of giving your pain to God. It's just it's really powerful. I think it's more powerful than people think, and it's definitely not easy, but yeah, that was very helpful for me.
Yeah. Yep.
So I just want to ask because, again, I still can't get over that you're only 18 years old. And I mean, the how smart you are, what you've been through. I mean, you're teaching us things that people that are, in their 50s and 60s can't comprehend or don't understand. So I hope you appreciate how smart you are, Presley, and how much you've taught us in this podcast. I mean, I have notes. I literally was just texting Rich how good you are and telling him what you think you taught
Oh,
me. So like, I'm just legitimately, right? So you are an amazing individual. So you're 18 years old. I mean, tell us, were you able to get through high school? Where are you at now in your life?
yeah, so I was able to get through high school. I did a full online school through Classical Academy. And as well with that, like I'm a very overachiever. I honestly don't know how I did it, but I started college classes my sophomore year. So I was doing online community college classes because I was at a point where I was like, if I'm gonna get through this, I'm gonna get through this and live the best life possible because I deserve it. And I'm gonna make the best life possible for myself. So I was trying to get my GPA up, take all my college classes. And then even when I was still sick, I was trying to get involved with Generation Lyme, Global Lyme Alliance, because I was like, not only am I gonna like make my life the best possible, but I'm also going to do something about this because no one should have to go through what I went through. And I know so many people are going through it and it is not okay. So I was like, you know what? If God gets me through this, like I'm going to like help so many people and try to change this for so many people. So that was kind of like having a will as a way. Like I had that will and I was like, I'm gonna get through this. And if God gets me through this, like I'm just gonna like do something amazing with it and like help so many people. So I finished high school. I started getting involved with these organizations. I was building up my resume, I had all these college classes, and then I was applying for colleges, which I never thought like I was gonna be able to like go back to school, go back to college, or return to normal life. So my senior year was when I really got better. Because I got better like the summer between my junior and senior year. And then I was just starting to really regain my function, like go to the gym, just kind of do anything that I wanted to do. And then I started getting more involved with my doctor, and I got an internship with Dr. Madeline Cunningham. I worked in her microbiology lab with a focus on brain, immunology, and heart. And that was amazing. So I went out to Oklahoma to go work with her at the Biomedical Research Center for a month. And actually, before that, I went on this trip with my mom for a month, like around the world, because I had been in my room for like 4 years. So we were traveling around the world. And on this trip, we'd met these people from Oklahoma. This was a month before my internship. I was like, okay, she's offering me like a month internship. And I could do this because I was doing school online. And I was like, but I don't know anyone out in Oklahoma. And we met these people who lived in Oklahoma. We became really good friends with them. And they're like, you can just stay with us. So I stayed with them, had the best internship. I learned so much about the brain, so much about the heart. I learned a lot about pandas and just microbes. I met this PhD MD who wrote this book called Biotechnology Entrepreneurship. And that's when I got really interested in biotechnology and diagnostics because I was like, trying to think, I was like, okay, what is the first thing that could help people? And I think it's better accurate testing that is accepted. So if we had accurate testing that is accepted by insurance, by the CDC, that's like actually good, then we could get people diagnosed and recognized, and then we can worry about treatment. There's already so many treatments out there. People have whatever, but biotechnology is basically like technology for like biomedical things. So that includes like diagnostic testing for infectious diseases. So like, okay, this is what I want to do. And working with Madeline and like in her lab and with PhDs, I was like, okay, I want to be a PhD and go into research because I think I can help a lot more people than being a doctor. Because if I create like a medication or a test, that can help millions of people rather than like seeing a couple people a day. So then I was applying to schools. I was applying for neuroscience, biology, microbiology. So then I got a lot of my acceptance letters back. I got into LMU for Health and Human Sciences, which is in LA, Laurel Marymount University. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go there because it's an hour away from my home. I really like the campus. I got a single dorm, good food, and I'm just going back to school for the first time in 4 years. So I was like, I don't want to go. I got into Oklahoma, and then I also got into Michigan, and I got into these other ones. But I was like, I don't want to go all the way like across, which I'm glad I didn't because I've had 4 surgeries in like the last year. So I'm still dealing with like these little issues, but I've been going to school. I changed my major to biology, but now I'm doing transfer applications because I realize like I want to be more specific than biology. Like I want to be biotechnology or microbiology, immunology. And so I'm applying to some transfer, but I'm really hoping to get into Northeastern for their biotechnology undergrad, and I'd gotten to them for neuroscience, but I ended up picking LMU. But Northeastern also has a Lyme that, or a lab for Lyme that I would check out. It's called the Tactus Lab, I think, and it was just opened in January 2023 for studying Lyme. Also, the Global Lyme Alliance has Dr. Kim Lewis, who works at Northeastern, and they have biotechnology undergrad. So I'm applying there and gonna see what they say. But I think I'm gonna just move my major to something more specific. But that's what I'm doing now. And then I'm trying to get involved in more biotechnology companies and internships in general. So just looking for biomedical or biotechnology internships over the summer. I'm currently getting my phlebotomy certification as well because I love being on research teams. And me being so young, like I have experience because I was able to get experience when I was doing my high school online. But also people are and like maybe we'd rather have a senior instead of a freshman. So I'm getting my phlebotomy certification so I can draw blood and take samples, and people will be more inclined to have me on their research team. And also I can just start like working in Quest. And then yeah, I'm doing my biology degree, which is very intensive. I have biology, chemistry, I had medical terminology, um, like microbiology, a lot of these classes, but I love it. And LMU is definitely a good school, but it's too small and it's too non-specific, so that's why I'm wanting to transfer. But that's basically where I'm at. I love that I'm able to go to school and meet so many people. And then as well, with all the science stuff, I'm doing my music. I'm super passionate about music. I sing and I play guitar and piano and I produce and I DJ. So that's one of the things that also helped me get through Lyme, just doing something you're passionate about that makes you feel good. So I'm doing all that stuff on the side. LA is a great place to be for that. But I'm definitely busy with STEM. But yeah, I'm super interested in biotechnology, and I just want to create more better technologies for like testing and maybe even treatments, but I'm super interested in diagnostic testings and how we can get that better.
I mean, the world has to watch out because Presley Taylor is going to be changing the world. And I hope you stay on this path and you change the world in regards to Lyme disease to help so many people, the millions and millions around the world that are suffering and struggling with Lyme disease. And I'm just filled with hope and honestly joy for meeting you today because people like you are going to change the world. And I know it. And I just can't tell you how happy I am to have met you and how happy I am to have you be a part of this community, as unfortunate as may have been, and I'm sorry you had to go through it, but you are going to be inspired by your experience like you have been, and you are going to institute real change to benefit millions of people in the world. So I'm going to ask Dan and put him on the spot if he's comfortable asking the final question before we conclude this amazing, brilliant podcast interview.
Final question. Final question. Let me see here. So being so young and being through these experiences, what is not Lyme advice? What is the best life advice you have to give to everybody?
Best life advice. Honestly, just Just love, like loving yourself, and like loving the things that have happened to you, not necessarily like liking them, but just looking at everything from a perspective of love. Like not like this is wrong or this is bad, but loving it and being okay with it. Having that like I'm here with myself. This is my body. This is the one body I get. And like this is just the experience, and having that like awareness with that loving compassion is like the biggest life lesson. And also, if you truly love yourself and care about yourself, that reflects, because you won't even like, there is like, everyone has negative habits, but it's like when you actually like spend the time to love and care about yourself and appreciate and acknowledge your being, you won't even want to do those bad habits, because you're literally just so in love with yourself and life that you're just so effortlessly motivated to do good things for yourself and for others.
Yeah.
So I would say going inwards, just having that awareness, loving compassion of your experiences and yourself, and accepting yourself as you are, and working towards what you want to do, but just knowing that like where you are at is where you're meant to be. And there's a plan for everything. That's the biggest life lesson. And that's like what you can apply to everything. And it even talks about that in the Bible, like love above all. So love doesn't even necessarily mean like liking it, but just having that unconditional like love and awareness for all your experiences, makes life so much easier, and like not resisting it, because like everyone has suffering. And yeah, there's no point in like resisting it, or like being like obviously you need to feel those like angry emotions and negative emotions, but like just like seeing it for what it is, and that it's not you, and that you
Yeah.
are love. That's the best thing.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our experiences, us three here, we can say they weren't great experiences, especially dealing with like Lyme and stuff. But Presley, you're a lifelong friend. I would have never met you if I never
Yeah,
went through what I went through, right?
exactly.
Um, yeah. So same to you, Matt.
Yes.
Yeah, I would have
Well,
never met you as well. So it's incredible.
Sam, I just want to say, Dan, it's been an absolute honor having you back as a co-host. Presley, it's been an absolute honor having you on as a guest, and happy to have now met you and be able to call you a friend. I mean, I've learned so much from you, and I've been doing this podcast for 5 years. So thank you both so much for coming on and joining the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing.